Hi, I'm Liz Hirschnoff-Tolley, and welcome to Capital Coffee Connection. And I'm really excited because I have an amazing guest today, and he works in a Capitol, and we're having coffee.
That's right.
And we're going to connect.
Looking forward to it.
So thank you.
Of course.
And I want to just give a brief understanding of why we're doing this podcast. So there's a lot of podcasts where it's the latest news, the latest fighting, the latest legislation. On our podcast, we are not talking about politics and policy. We're talking about humanity and heart and home. You know, where people come from and who they are. Because I think so many times in our world, elected leaders are just thought of as a politician or as a cutout with a stump speech. But people don't get to really know that there's this amazing person who has really good stories, interesting families, and is doing amazing work and really is doing it from their heart. So you think about like the human genome, and 99.6% of all beings, 8 billion plus on planet Earth, are the same. It's only a 0.4 that is kind of what separates us. So I look at this as an opportunity to go, okay, what separates us? What is different, and how can we celebrate that as opposed to being taken apart by that? So I was thinking a little bit about our guest, and I was thinking back to my grandparents because they came through Russia, through Harbin, China, to America. And they didn't know each other all through that journey, but they met in Seattle at a dance. And I know that your parents immigrated from Eritrea.
That's right.
But they didn't meet there.
Correct.
They met in America, in Bakersfield.
That's right.
So I'm going to ask you how they met, because my grandparents met at a dance. And I just think that it's so interesting. We think people, when they immigrate, like they kind of know each other. But there's this beautiful surprise that they find somebody that they can relate to, and that's part of their community in a new place. So I want to welcome our guest. Joe Neguse is the congressman from Colorado's 2nd District. Mm-hmm. And just to give an idea of what that district is, it's really an interesting one, and he can elaborate more, but it has Boulder, Weld, Clear Creek, Eagle, Gilpin, Grand, Jefferson, Larimer, Summit, Jackson, and Route. And your district really is interesting because it's got city, it's got skiing, mm-hmm. It's got a lot of diversity. So maybe you can expand upon that in a minute, but I also think it's really cool that you are the first Black person to be a member in the House from the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool to be a first. I wish it weren't, you know. But if that is the way it's going to be, thank you for being that first, and thank you for the work you do. So we're going to just jump into getting to know who you are.
Sure.
So we're going to go back, I say, to the beginning of Joe time.
Okay.
And talk a little bit about growing up with parents that were immigrants. Maybe tell us how they met and what that was like in Bakersfield, because you spent your first years there and then you moved to Colorado.
That's right. Well, first, it's great to be with you.
Thank you.
And thanks for this opportunity and your kind words. And any thank you, it goes to my constituents, not to me, because they, were the folks that put their vote of trust and confidence in me to represent them. And our state, I think, is a very diverse and inclusive state, and
I like that.
Reflective in terms of the folks who represent them at the state level and in the House. I grew up in Colorado. As you mentioned, I spent a vast majority of my life there, but I was born in Bakersfield, California. Moved to Colorado when I was 6 years old. My parents, as you referenced, were both immigrants. They came here from Eritrea, a war-torn country in East Africa, came to the United States as refugees, met in Southern California, really met through, you have sparked in me an interest to ask my parents now for more details about their precise meeting.
Okay.
But my understanding is they met through shared networks.
Right.
There were a number of folks who were refugees from East Africa at that time in light of the war taking place there. And so they had family members that also immigrated, and through those mutual connections ended up meeting each other. They got married. I was born a year later. And
the rest is history.
The rest is history, yeah, exactly. My story, my family's story is not an uncommon one. You talked about your family's background. I think it is what is great about our country, right? Yeah. But for the freedoms and the opportunities that we have in the United States, we would not have been able to live the American dream. And my parents would not have been able to, come to a country as refugees with virtually nothing, and then 40 years later see their son serve in the U.S. House of Representatives.
It's very cool.
Yeah, to me it's emblematic of what we all aspire for our country to be, this beacon of hope and liberty, and a place where if you work hard and you make sacrifices, you can give back to your country in a variety of different ways.
Right.
And so, yeah, growing up with parents like my parents, who are really my heroes, my dad, my mom. I mean, they were. You think about kind of their lived experience. Again, all that they kind of went through and sacrificed. They worked very hard to build this middle class life for my sister and I. I have a younger sister who's about a year and a half younger, and I will be forever grateful to them. They, at a very early age, made clear to me and my sister that we had this obligation to pay it forward, that we had been tremendously lucky. Right? You sort of think about, I have a lot of cousins and an extended family who would never have the opportunities that I have here in the United States, and so
because they remain back.
Precisely, and so that was something to not take for granted, and at a young age, something that I was certainly cognizant of, and I'm grateful to my parents for making sure that awareness was something that we lived with, throughout our lives.
Yeah, when I hear that, I think about to appreciate. When you appreciate things in your life, you have a better quality of life also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about high school. Mm-hmm. Did you have a teacher or some outstanding moment that it was really inspiring, or somebody that took an interest in you as a young person outside of your family?
Sure.
That was motivational or special to this day in your life?
Certainly. I mean, I was a public school student from kindergarten in Colorado through all the way through law school. There were a number of teachers in elementary school and middle school and high school and college and law school who had an invaluable impact on me, who mentored me every step of the way. As I think right now in this instance, I would think back to my high school government teacher who was kind of my first foray into student government and really kind of learning more about American government, and she was an incredible teacher. And
what was her name?
Miss Vogt, Lisa Vogt. And yeah, I think that class had an indelible impact on me in terms of thinking about, in the future, what my career might look like. I certainly never envisioned serving in Congress, but I knew that I wanted to be engaged in public service in some way, and I certainly credit that class as one of the reasons. What
was another reason? Was something in, obviously, being your family?
Yeah. I mean,
school?
I think probably the largest driver, I'm not one for too much self-analysis, and I let others, kind of reach their own conclusions about, my motivations. But my general driver as to why I decided to pursue public service is largely born from my parents' experiends and their journey to the country, and
giving back and pushing, paying forward, like you said.
Precisely, paying it forward, and when you know and have a visceral understanding of the sacrifices that your family has made to put you in a position in which you can contribute, and you also are cognizant of just how incredible American citizenship is, and the miracle of democracy, which does not exist in a lot of places in the world. You, at least for me anyway, it gave me a zeal for serving, and so that's something.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I credit that to my parents.
Yeah. So did you have any first jobs that were, not romantic and not sexy, but hard ones or interesting ones when you were in high school and in college?
Yeah, sure. I was a lifeguard, for many years. I worked at our local recreation center, handing out basketballs and trading in the equipment. Did that in college as well at the rec center. They helped me pay the bills,
Absolutely.
helped me pay for college. Enjoyed those jobs. Yeah, and some days those are, and they were all, you learn something new and different from each one of the jobs that you have throughout life.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's getting the people experience also.
Totally.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're not
a lot
happy.
of interactions.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Yeah. Which is kind of what you do now.
Customer service.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of what you do now.
Yeah, precisely.
So you are married to Andrea.
Yes.
And you all have 2 kids, Natalie and Josh.
That's right.
Okay. So I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about how hard it is, how wonderful it is to be a parent. Yeah. And now your first daughter is about 5 and you have a newborn. So how do you balance that with also having to be in D.C. and having to also serve your constituents in Colorado? Because that's a lot.
It's a challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, look, first and foremost, being a parent is a sort of blessing upon blessing. I mean, I always wanted to be a parent, and when my wife and I welcomed our first child into the world, Natalie, who's now turning 5 and has started kindergarten, and
Very cute.
It changed our lives, and it has given me the greatest joy being a parent. It's the funnest job that I have. Certainly the part of my life that I enjoy the most.
Right.
As you mentioned, we now have a newborn son who's a couple months old, Joshua, and so his bigger sister is enjoying him also.
I'm sure. She's another mother.
Yet another mother. Big plans for him all summer. So it's been a fascinating experience. It has been a challenge. My wife is incredible and has been just such a dedicated and committed partner, and she really, I mean, she's an incredible mother. She's and as you referenced, I spend a lot of time on the road. I'm in Washington, D.C. a lot. They don't tell you when you're running for Congress, although I suppose it should be intuitive that you're going to spend a lot of time in the nation's capital. I've spent almost all my life in Colorado, as I mentioned. When I moved to Colorado when I was 6, I spent very little time outside of the state up until I got elected to Congress in 2018. So it's tough because it's a privilege to represent our
Absolutely.
great state, but part of the main reason why I live in Colorado is because I love living in Colorado and being there with my family. And not having that opportunity to see them every day is a challenge. But there are, notwithstanding the reality is there are countless other parents making far bigger sacrifices than I am. It's a privilege to be able to go represent your state in Congress, and so we balance out the additional responsibilities we might have and we make it work. And there are a lot of other young members of Congress who you've interviewed, I suspect, who are trying to achieve that same balance.
Yeah, and and I think you have each other, but I also say this part, which is I love that our country has young leaders, because we don't want to be in a position where we just have older folks, because you can actually understand the struggle.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, you can understand your constituents' struggle if you can relate by having those experiences.
Totally.
It's a different way. Okay, now I just want to ask about, you have a dog named Teddy.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Teddy, and does Teddy happy Joshua arrived, or is Teddy jealous?
So it's interesting.
Because this is an important question.
It's an important question. He is not jealous. He kind of he's interacted with Joshua in the same way he interacted with Natalie when she was born. He loves Natalie now. They are partners in crime, getting in all sorts of trouble.
Yeah.
But early on when she was born, he wasn't really sure kind of how to approach interacting with her. Joshua now and Natalie when she was born, you're not mobile, right? You're not talking much.
But you take up a lot of the parents' time.
You do take up a lot of the parents' time, but he's also older now than he was. So we adopted Teddy from the rescue puppy 12 years ago. He'll be 12 in October. So he's
up there.
He's up there. He's incredible, got all kinds of energy, but he's been a really big part of our life. Me and Andrea, since we've been together 13 years.
Oh,
We've
wow.
been married for will be our 8-year anniversary here next month, and so we've had Teddy for nearly that entire time. So he is our first child.
I like that. I like that. Can you share with us what might be the best advice you've ever received? Worst advice? It can be personally, it could be politically. I'm just curious, like good advice and advice you're like, yeah, somebody told me that and it was just not the right thing.
That's a great question. A tougher question about worse advice. I don't know.
So just do best.
I'd have to think about that. Yeah. But best advice, I'd say a couple of different things. I think early on, when I got involved in public service, there was an individual that I worked for. He was the Speaker of the State House of Representatives in Colorado, and I was his driver. I worked for him later as his scheduler. And we would talk a lot about politics and policy. And again, this was at a time when I certainly would never had envisioned serving in Congress. But he would often talk about the need for public servants to have intellectual curiosity, all right, to be willing to kind of see a problem through the lens of perhaps someone who has a different worldview than your own. And a lot of what's missing in our public policy discussions these days seems to be precisely that. And so that advice wasn't so much direct advice as much as it was an observation that that he offered and that I gleaned and that I could have recalled. and have tried to put to good use and try to remind myself of.
Yeah.
Because, there's this temptation to kind of just think that you know the answer or that your party knows the answer. And at the end of the day, you learn more by willing to be open to different solutions. So that's
great
probably,
advice, actually.
There's other advice I've got. Being nimble in terms of not. I had one mentor who sort of advised that while it's great to have goals and pursue your dreams, you don't want to be so fixated on a particular path that you kind of lose the forest for the trees and you miss opportunities that might come along. And that was really thoughtful advice that I don't know that I necessarily took that advice certainly all the time, but I've tried.
Well, I don't think advice is something you take all the time, but it's something you absorb, and I do think it does play a part in your decisions if you actually let it be a part of.
Yeah.
And you didn't think you were going to be a leader, and now you are, an elected leader. Who is your biggest cheerleader?
Who is my biggest cheerleader? My wife. I mean, it's my best friend and my partner, and so she will be supportive. Even when I know, sometimes you deliver a speech that you didn't think was the most compelling, and she'll also be honest with me, and she, keeps me honest.
Keeps you humble.
It keeps me humble. But my wife, my parents, my mom, my children, my daughter, who's now, she is.
I love that.
It's incredible to be able to kind of. She's getting older and starts to understand the job that I have and the role that I'm trying to play, and it's been fascinating to kind of to see that unfold.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because she sort of has grown up with you as you've been in the Congress.
That's right. I mean, she was born a month after I had won the primary election.
Yeah.
She was only 5 months old when I was sworn into the United States Congress, and she's 5 now. So it's been a real.
It'd be interesting to see and check in through the years, Yeah. Totally switching. If you were on a desert island and there was one meal you could have and that you would want to have, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. One meal.
Just so you can make two.
But I
want to make it tough for you.
And this is a meal that I'm going to be eating like for every...
that's a good question.
Or is this...
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
So it's the context of this
the
meal.
context is like, what is your favorite meal? That there's nothing else. You can't go in the fridge and pick something else.
It's tough. I mean, I guess if I pick one meal, it would probably be... I'm going to sound so simple and just as like
I love it.
Spaghetti and meatballs.
That's the best.
It
covers a lot of food groups. It tastes good. I like it. Do you have time to exercise?
I do. I don't do it as much as I should. Often.
What do you do for exercise?
So I love playing pickup basketball. Played basketball my whole life. There's a gym in the house, in the U.S. house, and so there used to be pickup games, bipartisan pickup games that we would play. Those have kind of dwindled in recent years, and so it's probably time for me to dust off the sneakers and get back into it. I come, as I said, from Colorado, a state that is famous for its hiking trails and biking trails. So my wife and I used to, before we had kids, we do a lot more running, and we still go on hikes with, of course, Natalie now. And we haven't taken Joshua out on a hike quite yet. He's still kind of
little.
Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of music do you enjoy listening to?
I have a very eclectic. It's been I describe it as eclectic. I don't know that my wife would agree with me with that characterization of it, but I think it's eclectic. I listen to everything from hip hop and R&B to soft rock. You name it. If you go through my iPod, or I don't know, iPod
there's
now, my iPhone.
I know, iPod, you just like totally
I'm dating myself
yourself.
by about 10 decades, but if you went through my iPhone, the songs would jump back and forth from decade to decade.
I love it.
You might find, Jay-Z and Tupac, and then it would, go to Journey and John Mayer. I mean, it is,
I like it. Yeah. That's good. Do you play Wordle, by the way?
I don't play Wordle. I never gotten into Wordle.
I just wonder,
my wife does.
I started about a month and a half ago because people had said, and one day I was like, I'm just going to do it. And then you become really quickly addicted because it's 5 minutes in the morning. It's kind of like a new piece for me.
Yeah, everyone describes it as a very kind of engrossing, it's
as long as it's condensed amount of time,
I have to try it.
Yeah. What is your favorite color?
Blue.
Dark, light? Just curious.
I mean, probably light more than dark, but I'm just
Okay.
thinking sort of a simple
Yeah.
blue. I don't
And what is your zodiac sign?
know. Taurus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Does that represent you well, you think?
I don't know. I am not a
Following.
particularly knowledgeable person about zodiac, but my wife does follow that pretty closely, astrology, and thinks that it's a fairly good representation of my personality.
Okay, good.
Good or bad. I
Yeah, yeah.
suppose. I don't
Okay,
know
now
if that's-
speaking of wife, what is your favorite chore, household chore?
my favorite household chore, probably dishes.
Dishes.
Yeah.
Are you good at them?
Yeah.
Does Andrea think you're good at them?
Well, I'm very good at loading, unloading the dishes, but yeah, I don't. You have to interview Andrea to get.
Yeah, I'd have
better
to
sense
ask
as
her
to
later.
whether or
I'm
not
gonna double check this
but
one.
yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. Where in the world would you and Andrea like to travel to that you've never been? If you
That we've never
could
been.
pick the place. Yeah.
Well, we've been. It's a tough question because we've been to different places. So I think, but that being said, there are a number of places in Africa that neither her or I have been to that I think we'd love to visit. Neither of us have been to Egypt, and I would love to be able to visit Egypt. And I'm a student of history, and so you to be able to journey to that part of the world
It would be awesome.
would be pretty incredible.
Yeah. So,
But she might have a very different answer for. She's interested in going to Egypt too, but she has other.
well, she might have
places
like the
that
idea of
she's-
like a relaxing beach somewhere.
No, I mean, well, yes, but also she.
I'm not
likes-
saying in a bad way. I'm just saying
Yeah.
2 kids.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah, I
true.
was giving her a break. I
No,
was
no,
letting
no.
her take a little time off.
No, she's much more. She's also a student of history, and so I think she would probably have, some European countries that she'd love to visit. That, I mean, a bunch of different places.
Listen, you have a long life ahead. You're young,
Yeah.
and you could do a lot. So I like that. Just that it's nice you have somebody you want to do it with.
Totally.
So now we play this little game called Kiss, Marry, Trash. Some people know it as Kiss, Marry, Kill, and basically I do trash because we don't kill. But you pick. I will give you 3 things, and you say kiss, what you would marry, what you would trash.
Huh.
It's a hard one.
Okay.
But I've done this with some of your colleagues,
I
and
may
they
opt
have,
out of this game depending on the.
No, it's kind of fun, and you can really just talk about the answers. It's not there's no quiz, but it's just a nice way to kind of get to know you on a few levels. So, the first one is chocolate chip cookies, ice cream, or apple pie. So, what would you marry?
Chocolate
What would
chip
you
cookies.
kiss, and what would you trash?
And it was chocolate
Chocolate
cookies,
chip cookies, ice cream, apple pie.
apple pie. Well, I mean, my favorite dessert above any other dessert would be apple pie, and so
you'd marry it.
that is. But hard to envision a world in which you wouldn't be able to have ice cream or chocolate chip cookies. I don't. That's a Hobson's choice. I mean, I don't know that you can.
That's too much?
Yeah, that's too much. That's
Okay.
too much.
See, you
but
settle-
but
you
apple
say
pie.
apple pie's
definitely
one.
at the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seasons: summer, fall, winter.
Boy, what tough questions. This is.
Yeah,
I've done a lot
well-
of podcasts. These are tough questions because Colorado, as you know, we have epic winters, and we are the undisputed champion of winter sports, and so I could never give up our winters. That's I represent Vail and Winter Park, Breckenridge, Steamboat Springs.
places.
I mean, the best ski
skiing,
and
yeah.
snow sports resorts in the country, in the world. So winter got to be at the very top, and then a season that I would give up. I mean, gosh, what a tough. I also could never give up fall. Fall is
It's just beautiful.
is really, yeah. I mean, it's arguably my favorite season. We're big Halloween fans. I say we, my family,
yeah,
my
yeah,
wife
yeah.
and I are.
That's a big celebration.
It's a big celebration. Natalie, now our daughters, we have passed that on to her, so she's very into it. So we couldn't give up fall.
You know what I was going to say? I just thought about this because, Colorado is so interesting. You could almost have in one day winter, fall, and summer in Colorado.
Correct. It's why it's 100%. That's why it's tough for me to make to opine on this particular choice because we get all the seasons in
And sometimes in one day.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might get a blizzard, and then by the next day the snow is all dissipated.
Right. And there's some sun and there's some leaves are changing colors. Netflix, if you know for relaxing, Netflix, reading, meditating. So how would you rank those? Netflix, reading, meditating.
I've never. Well, again, tough. I would put reading at the top, just because I've always kind of been
A reader.
voracious reader, and I spend a lot of time on the plane now, going back and forth from Colorado to Washington. So I spent a lot of time reading. And then, I don't know, Netflix, meditating. That's tough.
They can both be. They can both be. You can kiss both. I don't want to put you under pressure.
They provide different.
Yeah.
They connect with different parts of your brain, right?
Yeah. Meals: breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Definitely cannot go without lunch. Because of the schedule, as such, oftentimes I'm taking a really early flight out of Colorado, and so maybe I'll miss breakfast, even though I know they say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But yeah, and because the time change, in Washington's
you get there,
2 hours ahead.
Time,
yeah, so the next day when I'm in Washington, it's kind of, I can never really get breakfast right. So I could probably do without breakfast.
That's interesting. Okay. Food types: Mexican, Japanese, Italian.
That I got to opt. I mean, every one of those is. I could not. Yeah, they're all good.
Okay.
My wife is Hispanic, and so all kinds of different Mexican American dishes that we love. As I mentioned, spaghetti was I can't backtrack from the last meal question that you posed earlier, and then Japanese. We love sushi, and great sushi restaurants in Colorado. So yeah, that's
a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
But in it, we kind of figured out
like any good politician, I've now
right. You're
found a way to avoid taking a position on that.
Okay, you've really much said it all. I'm going to even end on that one. I'm not going to ask you anymore because you have basically proven my theory that you've gotten around talking about the really tough issues. But I end each time, and I think this is a great way to kind of end our talk, is the question of joy. Mm-hmm. I hear about how much you love your family and your parents and your kids and your wife, and that's all part of it. But I really would love just to get from you, what is your definition of what joy is, what joy means to you personally, and then about how you spread joy, because you're in communications. That is one of your talents. That is one of the fields that you work in. And communications is really about messaging. Mm-hmm. And we're not messaging a specific policy, but messaging positive energy. Yeah. So I'd love to hear a lot of your, a way for you to kind of bring all that together.
Yeah. As you said, I derive the greatest joy from my family, which I suspect most Americans, feel the same way. And to your point, at the outset of this interview, the notion that we all share generally the same values, and we're all a lot more alike than we are different. I certainly think that that's true, and perhaps one of the best metrics of that, or best examples, is the way in which we derive joy in our lives, and the fact that so much of that comes from our families. For me, if I were going to define joy, the way in which I would define it personally is an innate and unbreakable sense of hopefulness about the current state of affairs and the future that you're building. That to me is what joy. When I feel joy, mm-hmm. it's a sense of hope about our ability to solve big problems, to tackle big challenges. And I think I talk about this often, that there was a quote. I don't want to belabor this too long, but when I was campaigning for Congress 5 years ago, for the first time, near the end of the campaign, I toured a children's hospital. And at the hospital, we went through a wing where terminally ill, seriously ill children are educated. There was a classroom, and on the classroom was a wall of quotes that the students had been asked to identify and put up mm-hmm. on the wall. And there was one quote, and it has stayed with me, and I've used it now in speeches, and I talk about it often. And the quote was, "Fear is contagious, but so is hope," which to me captures so much. And this was, by the way, this is pre-COVID-19 pandemic, literally, when we think about contagions. But also, this was before a lot of the, shall we say, larger developments in our public policy.
The negative energy that's
the
been
negative energy
around.
in the last couple of years, right? And so, for me, I certainly believe that is true. Fear is contagious. And there are a lot of politicians, I don't mean pejorative here about a particular party or not, but just there are people who I think weaponize, leverage fear, and that's kind of the game, certainly in Washington. From my perspective, the best public servants that have served our country in the past have done so by spreading hope, by trying to find ways to make sure that hope is just as contagious as fear. And it turns out that it is, because people fundamentally are more inclined to be hopeful, I think, than fearful, if you approach them from a values-based proposition as opposed to maybe talking to them about different issues. And so that's kind of the way that I define it. That's the way that I've approached it. We have an obligation to spread hope, and I try to. But I'm speaking as someone who ran for his first public office when Barack Obama was running for president, and remember watching him
and
as he spoke to the country about hope and about the hope that he brought to the table and the hope that he generated in millions of young people, myself included.
Yes.
And so one hopes that you can kind of continue that theme and pass the baton, to the next generation of young people coming up today.
Well, you're his next generation,
Well, I'm getting a lot older, so I might be
the
next generation after me. But
well, thank you. And what I think about is like your two young children, and that you and people who are elected leaders, and I think so many people that give back to our country. Many of us know that we are doing it for our children, our grandchildren, and making sure that we make this place, again, a place that is hopeful and that feels good and that is inclusive, because there's nothing better, and you know this, than feeling like you're at home, in your own city, in your own state, and in your own country. So I want to thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Because I really enjoyed getting to know you and learn a little bit more about your family and coming as an immigrant family, and really what special parents and beautiful wife you have, and amazing children.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining me, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks so much. Looking forward to it.